50% of Americans expect another civil war in the next few years, according to a study done by UC Davis. That is a shocking statistic, but is it really surprising? If you turn on MSNBC, watch political TikToks, browse QAnon subreddits for more than 5 minutes, you'll see how mentally deranged all of us have become when it comes to politics. Next year, whether you like it or not, Trump will likely lose the presidency, which will launch us into another round of stop the steal. What if it got so bad that certain conservative parts of the country tried to secede from the US once again? Now, if Trump were to win the election and California tried this shit, I kind of think Trump would probably just be like, all right, see you later, and that would be the end of it. But if Biden were in power and red states who liberals already consider to be full of deplorables and fascists tried to leave, do you think the Democratic Party would really let that happen without sending in troops to stabilize the situation? And if troops are sent in and things become violent, and we literally have A, proxy war in Ukraine, B, a potentially real war in Israel, and C, a war at home, how much longer do you think our great American experiment really hangs on for?
Shalom. I would like to give all honor, glory, and praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Rakah Kodash. I would like to give double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Salutations to all you sincere Akim, pushing this word across the four corners of the world. Just another news update through the spirit, the power, and the vibration of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua. And I have an article from Irish Star, and it says, Civil War is coming. Over 40% of Americans fear U.S. will be torn apart in 5 years. And this article was written by Rebecca Robinson and John O'Sullivan. And it says, a recent poll has shockingly unveiled that over 2/5 of Americans believe that their country could be at the brink of a civil war in the coming half-decade. Rasmussen reports carried out a nationwide telephone and online survey, which disclosed that 41% of potential voters in the U.S. envision a repeat of civil war looming large, with 16% asserting it could be an imminent possibility within the next 5 years. And speaking as a man, and how Yahweh Bahashem Yahushua speed up time, I truly doubt that this God-forsaken kingdom, America, will be standing within the next 5 years. Just the way things are going, just the way the things and the minds of these American people are so chaotic and demonic. And the way that the so-called powers that be are pushing forth their agendas via their left-hand prophesying called revelation of the method, where there's nothing but a psychological warfare tactic and also a Freemasonry ritual where the so-called powers that be, they disclose their hidden agendas or secret plans cryptically through their entertainment, such as movies, TV shows, cartoons, video games, books, commercials, and the list goes on. And again, that's their way of so-called prophesying of what they have planned for the world via their NWO agenda before it actually takes place. And of course, it's going to go over the majority of the people's heads. And that's because the majority of these people, especially within America, are in total gross darkness, as it's stated within Isaiah the 60th chapter. However, they do that revelation of the method just so they can say, well, we told them or warned them. So it says, contrarily, 49% of those surveyed were inclined towards the belief that a civil war happening in the next 5 years is improbable, whereas 20% were of the opinion that it's highly unlikely. The data further reflected the issue as being rather partisan, with 37% of the electorate agreeing upon increased probabilities of a civil war if Joe Biden manages to secure another term this year. In contrast, a lesser percentage, 25%, think that the conflict is more plausible under the regime of Donald Trump, and 30% opine that the identity of the president wouldn't significantly alter the potential, reports the Express US. Those aligning with the Republican Party exhibited greater worry about a forthcoming civil war, with over half of them, 54%, anticipating one by 2029. According to Rasmussen reports, the possibility that America could face another civil war soon is not too far-fetched for a lot of voters. This information was gathered from a survey including 1,105 voters, and it highlighted that women, young adults, and non-white Americans were among the groups more likely to foresee a civil war striking within 5 years. According to a recent YouGov poll of 35,000 individuals, growing support for secession is evident among certain U.S. states, with Alaska leading at 36%. Texas follows closely with 31%, trailed by California and New York at 29% and 28% respectively. Daily Express U.S. correspondents recently spoke to several vocal Trump supporters outside his hush money trial in New York. One person forewarned of impending civil war if Trump loses the upcoming election. One such supporter, Juliet Germanata, adamantly confirmed her intention to vote for Trump, describing the trial as nothing more than a witch hunt. Juliet pronounced that failure to secure Trump's victory will result in an empire is gonna crumble, crumbling. She chillingly warned, no matter what happens here, the verdict, Trump's gonna win or there will be a civil war. I'm not stupid. If you don't vote for Trump, this great big empire is gonna crumble. And all of the inevitable signs of this second American Civil War are there. Like this country is in trillions of dollars in debt. And whereas this inflation crisis is affecting the lives of these everyday Americans, they are continually complaining about the cost of living, and it's more so aimed at the politicians. And for the ones of them that have some type of sense, they're blaming the international bankers. So that's causing more friction. Then you have this great moral decline within America, and where it's blatantly pushing this idealism of Satanism within this American society, that doest thou wilt vibration, and where that's causing a major gap or friction between the so-called pro-Christians and these atheists. And you have these different political classes, such as the Democrats, the Republicans, the conservatives, the liberals, and they're all blaming it on the liberals or the Democrats, or vice versa, or why this country is going down the drain. And you definitely cannot forget about this migrant crisis that's taking place, and where they are receiving above average treatment by this American government, like monetary aid, shelter, food, and the list goes on. And these migrants are getting much better treatment from this American government than the U.S. veterans. And within this American society, you are seeing more and more homeless people, especially more homeless U.S. veterans. So it's definitely a big line drawn between these Americans. And all of that boiling vibration is going to potentially lead into a second American Civil War. And just like the first American Civil War that started on April the 12th, 1861, and it ended on April the 9th, 1865, you had a lot of debating issues between the northern states and the southern states, like from economic policies and practices, different cultural values, the role of slavery within this American society, because the northern states, they wanted to emancipate the slaves, which means to transfer. So therefore, they could be more so a corporate slave compared to the southern states having them in captivity, aka on plantation fields. Because these Edomite slave masters within the South, they became very wealthy on the economics of slavery. Remember, cotton back then was considered as white gold. So that led to a friction between the southern states and the northern states. Then on top of that, the election of Abraham Lincoln back in 1860. So the point being is, those same spirits that was back in the first American Civil War are definitely back within this second pending American Civil War. And that takes me right to Ecclesiastes 1 verse 9 in the NLT. History merely repeats itself. It has all been done before. Nothing new under the sun is truly new. And history repeats itself because those same spirits are back here in a process called reincarnation. And they're playing out those same roles within this lifetime. So therefore, nothing under the sun is truly new. And I came across some pretty good info concerning what truly led to the American Civil War. And this is from simonandschuster.com. And as you can see right here, the suppressed history of American banking. How big banks fought Jackson, which is Andrew Jackson, killed Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, and caused the Civil War. And this book was written by Aviant Hayes. It just briefly touched on, like, what's this book about? It says, reveals how the Rothschild banking dynasty fomented war, which means to stir up, and assassination attempts on 4 presidents in order to create the Federal Reserve Bank. Explains how the Rothschild family began the War of 1812, which was the war that the U.S. declared war on Britain that took place on June the 18th, 1812. And it says, because Congress failed to renew a 20-year charter for their central bank, as well as how the ensuing debt of the war forced Congress to renew the charter. Details Andrew Jackson's anti-bank presidential campaigns, his war on Rothschild agents within the government, and his successful defeat of the central bank. Reveals how the Rothschilds spurred the Civil War and were behind the assassination of Lincoln. In this startling investigation into the suppressed history of America in the 1800s, its Avian Hayes reveals how the powerful Rothschild banking family and the central banking system, now known as the Federal Reserve Bank, provide a continuous thread of connection between the War of 1812, the Civil War, the financial crisis of the 1800s, and assassination attempts on Presidents Jackson and Lincoln. The author reveals how the War of 1812 began after Congress failed to renew a 20-year charter for the central bank. After the war, the ensuing debt forced Congress to grant the central bank scheme another 20-year charter. The author explains how this spurred General Andrew Jackson, fed up with the central bank system, and Nathan Rothschild's control of Congress to enter politics and become president in 1828, citing the financial crisis engineered by the banks. And that's because all wars are bankers' wars. Jackson spent his first term weeding out Rothschild agents from the government. After being re-elected to a second term with the slogan, Jackson and no bank, he became the only president to ever pay off the national debt. When the central bank's charter came up for renewal in 1836, he successfully rallied Congress to vote against it. The author explains how, after failing to regain their power politically, the Rothschilds plunged the country into civil war. He shows how Lincoln created a system allowing the U.S. to furnish its own money without need for a central bank, and how this led to his assassination by a Rothschild agent. With Lincoln out of the picture, the Rothschilds were able to wipe out his prosperous monetary system, which plunged the country into high unemployment and recession and laid the foundation for the later formation of the Federal Reserve Bank, a banking scheme still in place in America today. And this same elite family, referring to the Rothschilds and along with their counterparts, are going to economically plunge this country, America, into another civil war. And that's by crashing this American dollar. Keep pumping out more Federal Reserve notes out here, which is simultaneously devaluing the American dollar, which is why you're seeing this inflation crisis going on the way it is in today's time. And very, very soon, they're going to soon do away with this American dollar, and it's all going to be transitioned into a digital monetary system, like a whole digital money paradigm. And that will come into the fruition of Revelation, the 13th chapter and the 16th verse, and how he calls it all. And that's in the form of that charisma, which is the MOTB. So with that all being said, all of these draconian measures that's intentionally being pushed out by the hierarchy of Esau Edom is placing more and more of these Americans into economic straits, which is causing more of a burden effect upon these everyday Americans. And that's why the scriptures goes into the burden of Egypt, which is the new spiritual Egypt, America. So with all these different theories, these different belief systems, politics, agendas, it's causing a line drawn between these different classes of America. And that takes me right to Mark 3 verse 23. And this is Yahushua speaking. And he called them unto him and said unto them in parables, how can Satan cast out Satan? And if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. Like for instance, you have Christianity, which was birthed from the Roman Catholic Church. Like look at all of these different denominations under Christianity. But I thought it's supposed to be just about serving the Creator. Like why do you have all these different denominations? Then trickling on down, you have these different churches that be right in front of one another. Like if you're all about serving one God, one Creator, why do you have all of these different doctrines? And you're supposed to be under the umbrella of Christianity. So right there alone, that's causing division. Then on top of that, you have all of these different political parties, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, and where all these different political parties were created by the so-called powers that be, mainly the Rothschild family. So all of those different political parties have different theories or belief systems, which is causing more friction and hatred between these everyday Americans. The red states against the blue states. So right there alone, that's division. However, you're supposed to be the so-called United States, but it's nothing but division amongst you. So going back to Mark 3:24 again, and if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. Which goes right back to the article we just read, how a civil war within America is definitely coming. And again, I definitely believe it's not going to be within another 5 years. Like the way things are going, this can pop off any day now, especially after the so-called election. Verse 25, and if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And that house in this sense represent America. And when you read Zechariah, the 5th chapter, it goes into about the house of the thief. And that house of the thief is referring to America, aka Babylon the Great, that's being ran by the tabernacle of Esau Edom. And that's who Yahushua mainly has his eyes on, and to dethrone these elite bankers and to implement his righteous great reset. Verse 26, and if Satan rise up against himself and be divided, he cannot stand but have an end. And according to the book of Habakkuk, it goes into about at the end, it should speak. Like more and more people are worried about a potential civil war happening within America. And we just saw the elites prophesy on the left-hand side again via revelation of the method of a movie called Civil War just came out within theaters. And a lot of these Americans are fed up with these politicians. They're vocalizing their complaints and hatred via social media nowadays. Like you're seeing more and more videos of Americans, especially these Edomite Americans, complaining about the American struggle. And I came across an article on Yahoo Finance, and it stated how 80% of Americans are still struggling financially 4 years after the pandemic. So more and more of these everyday Americans are unhappy about the way that this economy is going, which is causing a gloom effect upon these everyday Americans' aspirations, their objectives, their goals, and dreams. And that takes me right to 2nd Ezra, the 15th chapter, the 12th verse. Egypt shall mourn. And Egypt, in this sense, is referring to America. As it's stated within Ecclesiastes, the 12th chapter, how those that look out of the windows be darkened. Like more and more Americans are becoming more helpless and more hopeless, and more so into that spirit of perplexity, anxiety, just stress the hell out. So Egypt shall mourn, and the foundation of it shall be smitten with the plague and the punishment that Yahweh Bahashem Yahushua shall bring upon it. And that main plague is going to be those nuclear missiles, and also by Yahushua via his second coming along with the holy angels. As it stated within Zechariah, the 5th chapter and the 3rd verse, how this is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth, and how it's going to enter into the house of the thief. And some of the other plagues we're seeing going on within America, the immorality, pride, adultery, idolatry, iniquities, wickedness, just Satanism being rampant on a high level day by day. And you cannot forget about famine, pestilences, and those economic straits. Verse 13, they that till the ground shall mourn, going into these farmers, for their seeds shall fail through the blasting and hail, and with a fearful constellation. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draw it nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. So that sounds like a civil unrest or civil rebellion. And all of those things I just mentioned earlier, it's all leading to a societal collapse, which are all the strategic plans of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, working through the minds of the kings of the earth, mainly Esau Edom. Verse 16, for there should be sedition among men, and that sedition goes into like insurrection or rebellion. You're seeing more and more civil uproars. Like look at this engineer protest that's happening amongst these university students, like protesting on the campus about this Israel-Hamas war. And even though this is nothing but a controlled event, but you really have people that's involved into this so-called protest really believe what they're protesting about. Like they really putting their hearts into it. And that can spill off in a more wider affliction within America. So for there should be sedition among men in invading one another, they should not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions should stand in their power. So a lot of these everyday Americans are waking up to the fact, like all of these economic woes is really being engineered by these international bankers, the same ones that plunged this American economy back in the 1860s, which led off into a major civil war within America. And we just read earlier how nothing new is truly under the sun. So of course, by these upset Americans can't get their hands on these international bankers, who else is in line? These different senators, these governors, these mayors, your local councilmen and politicians who are more than likely on board for this NWO agenda. Verse 17, a man should desire to go into a city and should not be able, which is those martial law checkpoints. For because of their pride, the cities shall be troubled. The houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. Which takes me right back to the title of this article. Civil war is coming. Over 40% of Americans fear U.S. will be torn apart in 5 years. So this second American Civil War is imminent. First and foremost, we just read within the prophecies of Yahweh Bahashem Yahushua, and also within Ecclesiastes 1 and 9, how there is no new thing under the sun. And history repeats itself mainly because those same spirits are back here all over again in a process called reincarnation, which is all biblical. So with that, hopefully you all was edified, you all stay strong, keep pushing forward. Shalom.